little bigger.
And there's still a feed for the video here, so.
Okay. And we're on
good.
my. Okay. All right. So I think we're good.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Hi everybody.
We're ready.
We're ready.
Sorry for the delay.
Sorry about that. How many tech professionals does it take to do a Google Hangout? Answer is more than one, apparently. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for inviting us to come down and talk. My name is Mike. I am a co-founder at a company called Kalabox Inc. We are working on doing Docker consulting. We also have a local development product called Kalabox, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And for a little bit of backstory, the last 4 years I was a co-founder at a Drupal digital agency called Kalamuna, which is based in Oakland. And now myself and Alec Reynolds, who is also was a co-founder at Kalamuna, we've split off and we're working on Docker-based workflows for local environments and for test and for production as well. But for today, we're just going to talk primarily about doing local development with Docker, specifically in the context of Drupal. And I'll be showing you our Kalabox product as a way to do that. So you can think about Kalabox as kind of like Vagrant, but based primarily in Docker containers. And it solves a lot of the pain points that Docker containers normally, or doing local development with Docker has, namely file sharing being really bad, and that it's hard to integrate with additional services. So we released a beta about a month ago. You can find us on github.com/Kalabox and also just kalabox.io. I'm going to be using the GitHub for today since we're doing an open source thing. We are in the middle of releasing a new version, which is what I'm going to be showing here today, which is this 13 Alpha 1. But we do have a stable release from last month, this Beta 1. But I'll be showing you the features in the pre-release. We don't recommend doing this unless you're adventurous until we actually do a release next Tuesday probably, and if you're interested in getting updates about the releases, you can go to kalabox.io and sign up for our waiting or our mail list right here. So card@enterprise.io. Subscribe, very easy, and then you just need to do that. So Kalabox is cross-platform, so we're going to install I'm just going to go through and install the Mac version of it, and we're going to pull down a site from Pantheon, which integrations is with Pantheon. That's the integration that I'm going to show. So what we're going to do is going to go from installing, from nothing to installing Kalabox and pulling a Pantheon site down and starting to do development in it in like 5 minutes, depending on how the internet is here. So you can download a package that makes sense for your operating system. I'm going to download the DMG because I am on a Mac, and I already have done that to speed things up for us, although I don't remember where I put it, which was probably not super smart. Downloads, maybe? That would certainly make sense. Where did I put that? Let's see. There we go. Let's do this. All right. Yeah. There we go. Oh, you know what? I actually ignore that. Let's see. I built one just for right now. Right, so you'll download the DMG. Here's the DMG. I'm opening the DMG. It has a nice package to install it. You can double-click it, and it's just a native Mac installer, so you can go through and do that. And what it's going to be doing right now is downloading all the stuff you need to run Docker locally. So in this case, VirtualBox, Docker Compose, Docker Machine, the Kalabox CLI, the Kalabox GUI, which we'll show you, And then it will set up the Docker engine so you can run Docker things inside of, or run Docker containers on your computer. This usually goes pretty quickly, somewhere between like a minute and 5 minutes, depending on the setup. So we'll let this go for a little bit. But when this is done, you'll have a running virtual machine where you can run Docker containers inside of it, and you'll have two nice utilities that we give you, the Kalabox CLI and the Kalabox GUI, and I'll show you both of those right away. The Kalabox GUI just installs in your applications folder, so it's just like right here. And then the Kalabox CLI is available on your command line, so if you just open up a terminal and run kbox, you'll get a bunch of stuff like that. I think that might have errored because we were in the middle of installing it. So yeah, so you'll go and you'll just run kbox on the command line, and you'll get the stuff, which is good. All that stuff. Here we go. The install is successful, which is great. And now what we can start to do is we can start to do local development, doing Drupal and Docker on our computer. We're just going to go to I'm going to show you the command line mostly, but I'll also show a little bit of the GUI as well. So I have a folder where I like to put all my apps, just called /desktop apps. Right now, nothing. Right now, you have tabula rasa. You have a blank slate. There's nothing in there. There's just a white canvas that is ready to be, filled with our creative whatevers. Sorry, that was not eloquent. Not a poet. Right, so we're in our apps folder now, and we want to create a site from Pantheon. So if you run the kbox command, you'll see that there's a bunch of different apps that you can kind of create out of the box. Just a stock backdrop, stock Drupal 7, stock Drupal 8, stock WordPress, and also Pantheon. So people who are, I'm going to demo the Pantheon thing, just show you the niceness here. So what we're going to do is pull down a site that I have on my Pantheon dashboard. So here is not the right account. So I have a Kalabox account on Pantheon, and I am in the middle of creating the best Drupal site ever. It's a normal Drupal 7 site that has all the Drupal 7 magic. So here's my magical Drupal 7 site. It's just called Kalabox Drupal 7, and it is just a normal Drupal 7 site with some content types added. So nothing special, just to give you a sense of what I'm going to do. But now you can see this is on Pantheon up there, pantheonsite.io. I want to develop on this locally, so I'm going to pull this site down and get it running locally. So kbox create Pantheon. And when I say create it locally, I mean that in a very serious way. We're not spinning up some rando web server and just pulling your code down. We're actually building more or less the Pantheon platform on your computer. So all the services and stuff that you have on Pantheon, you're also going to have on Kalabox. Yeah, that's interesting. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm running the development version right now, so this is maybe a little bit fraught with peril, but I know, I've paid so many sacrifices to the demo gods. But let's try to do this again. All right, so I'm going to create a Pantheon site. Here's my, I don't think you can really see this. Let me try to make this bigger. How do I make it bigger? Okay. Oh, that's maybe too big. So oops. So here's my Kalabox account. I've already logged in. You can log into a different Pantheon account if you want to. Here we can see these are actually all the sites that are listed on my Pantheon dashboard. I'm going to choose the one that we were looking at before, Kalabox Drupal 7. I'm going to pull down just the dev environment. If you have a multi-dev environment on Pantheon, it'll list all the environments that you have. And I'm just going to call this site test. What it's going to do right now is it's actually going to spin up a bunch of containers, Docker containers, that are running the Pantheon infrastructure. That means that it's going to install Redis and Solr and MariaDB and PHP 5.5. It'll match up with the PHP version that you have set in Pantheon, so we can provide that sort of parity for you, and it'll spin up the Pantheon. You'll also get a bunch of tools that will come. Right, yeah, so that's the other thing that we'll do is we'll also install a bunch of tools for you to use for this app. That means Drush and Node and NPM and Grunt and Terminus, which is the Pantheon CLI, and a bunch of other goodies. I think the WP CLI is in there as well. So we've spun up those containers, so now we have the infrastructure to run the site, and now this is where the nice Kalabox magic happens, which is we're actually grabbing your Git code and cloning it down, and we're going to grab a snapshot of your database and pull that down, and then we're going to rsync your files down. So when this is done, we should be able to go to test.kbox and see a replica of our Pantheon site locally. And barring my mess ups, we've gone from basically having nothing installed to doing serious dev on a Pantheon site within a couple of minutes. And not only do we have production parity with what Pantheon is running, but we also have all the tools that we need to do work on that site as well. All this running in the nice Kalabox VM using Docker containers. Obviously, the site pull will take as long as as big as your site is. So I have a stock Drupal 7 site, so it's fairly small. If you have a site that has a 200 megabyte code base and a gigabyte of files and a 300 megabyte database, it'll obviously take a little bit longer. There is no substitute for good internet. That is always true. So we should be finishing up soon. So then it gives you this nice little message, boom chakalaka, we've got a site at test.kbox. So if we go to test.kbox, we see the site. Here we go, there's our Drupal 7 site. And it should be the same as this one, wherever that went. So there we go, got the same thing going on. The only difference is I haven't entered my password into LastPass for this site yet, which makes sense. So now the next step is how do we do development on this site? What we'll do is we'll open up the Sublime Text will. Oh, interesting. I have a spinny balloon thing on my screen, actually, not that arrow. So just give me a second. But we'll open up the folder. I'm using Sublime Text as my IDE. You can use whatever IDE you want. But I've got, here's that site that I just pulled down called test. And this is all local on my computer. I've got a bunch of these files that are Docker Compose files and config files to actually run the infrastructure. But as a developer, all I care about is code. So here's my Drupal code. I can go in here, and here's my index.php, and I can do something like, hello world, and get the magic in there right away. So you've got the nice file sharing that's happening. It happens pretty quick. One of the nice things too is because we're running the Docker containers. Oops, wrong site. Close that so I don't. Because we're running the containers locally, we actually get some pretty good and fast, snappy performance. Oh, that's also on the. Sorry. Pantheon. Yeah, so we get the nice, quick, fast performance of a web server that's running locally. So you can do your dev super, super fast, way faster than you could using Vagrant or NFS or developing like locally or, sorry, on the cloud. One of the other nice things that we do is we install a bunch of tools for you. So you can go into your directory, here's test, and run kbox again, and you'll get a list of all the commands that we install for you. So now you get a list of commands that are much larger than what you had before. So here's that list that we had originally, and now we have similar notions. We can start this app, we can stop the app, we can restart it, we can rebuild it. We have these nice pull and push commands. Pull and push commands allow you to pull down changes on your Pantheon environment. Push allows you to deploy those changes back to Pantheon. And we also have all these commands installed for you too. So if I wanted to run, kbox drush status, I have drush installed as part of this. I don't have to install it myself, and it knows. Oops. Sorry, getting that weird thing again. And it just kind of knows. It'll just kind of know what to do. It'll be all set up and ready to go. So you can run kbox drush status, and it'll report back, here's my stuff. It even tells me, for example, that my settings file is missing, which is very helpful. So I can go back into my code base as an example and just add. Pantheon doesn't give you a default settings.php file because they don't need one, but drush requires one. So I'm just going to add one really quickly in here. That'll get sent back into the VM, and now when I run my drush command again, I should see the full sort of printout of the drush sort of info. Yeah, so here we go. So now I've got like the more traditional, sort of vibe. And we do a bunch of nice things too. So like on Pantheon, we will automatically pull down your Pantheon aliases. So if you run drush SA, you'll get the list of your Pantheon aliases, which is really nice. So you can do stuff on your Pantheon sites directly from there. We'll also do some nice things, like if you run terminus and just ask it who I am, I think this is the command, it'll use the token that you've already used to authenticate with Pantheon to get your terminus set up. So it'll know, hi, Mike, like you're Mike. So there we go, like Mike Pirog, here's my username, my ID, and everything. So you kind of get this stuff to work out of the box for you right away. So you don't have to worry about any of that. And all the tools, they come with the app that you install in. So if you install a normal Drupal app, like we won't install Terminus, we'll just install Drush. So the model is every app has everything that you need inside of it. You can blow it away, you can destroy it, you can turn it on and off really quickly. And once you do that, all your tools and all the things from that app are gone. So you're really siloing in everything you need into each app. Instead of having a bunch of different apps and a bunch of different tools, and maybe you mix and match them and no one knows what tools we're using on what apps. Now everything is the same for all your developers everywhere. Which obviously has advantages if you're used to working on teams. I'll try to do this a little bit quickly because I'd like to do a little Q&A just to give you a little bit of flavor. Almost everything that I've showed you, you can also do in the Kalabox GUI, which is just right here. So you can start and stop apps. You can get you can do push and pull. You can delete. You can look at your code. And then you can, if I wanted to spin up a Pantheon site, here's my account, and I can, pull down another site and create it that way. But you can do all that sort of magic through the UI as well. Right now, the CLI is much more stable than the UI, so just keep that in mind if you try it out. But we're definitely working to improve the GUI. So that's kind of the quick rundown of just like getting set up and pulling down a site and seeing that you have tools that you can use. I know that we want to do this fairly quick, so does anyone have any? I know that we're kind of behind, so I can just leave it at that. People have questions. I can certainly talk longer.
Not a problem.
So it's up to you guys, whatever you'd like to see.
Anyone wants to ask a question? I need to look. Would anyone like to ask a question?
So rather than putting a new site, if you create one from scratch, how do you do that?
Like a Drupal site?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I wanted to create a Drupal site, I do that. Kbox has this. So we have two core apps that we have as part of Kalabox. One is the Pantheon integration, so you can pull down your Pantheon sites. The other one is just to spin up stock PHP frameworks. So you can spin up a Drupal 7 site, a Drupal 8 site, a Backdrop site, or a WordPress site just by themselves. So if I wanted to create like, let's just do Backdrop, I guess. Are people familiar with Backdrop at all? Yeah, well, maybe I'll just do Drupal 7 again. So if I want to just create a normal Drupal 7 site, I just do kbox create Drupal 7, and it'll ask me some questions like, what do you want to call your app? I'll just call this like D7 or maybe just Sev. And then it will create a Drupal 7 site for me. The Drupal 7 site also will have its own infrastructure. So for Pantheon, Pantheon has very specific services that it uses. So we use those, we set those up. And those are not what the actual recommended Drupal settings are. So just to give you a very specific example, Drupal recommends that you use MySQL and Apache for your web server and your database server. Pantheon uses MariaDB and Nginx. So right now, when we're done, we're going to have a Pantheon app that's running on the things that Pantheon needs, and a Drupal app that's running what the actual Drupal requirements are. And that's all possible because we use Docker containers as the backend for all of this. So when we're done, we'll have a Drupal site set up. It actually pulls the normal Drupal image from the Docker Hub, so we're not even doing anything special. So you'll get a very bare bones app that just has the database and the web server and I think Drush and a couple of other small things. So you get very bare bones setup, but when we're done, you should have a Drupal site running and you can set it up. So I think this should be done.
Need to set up the settings that
Unfortunately, you don't need to set up the settings.php. You'll have to just put that info in there when you start. And in our documentation, it'll show you like where to look for the database credentials and stuff. Unfortunately, Drupal, unlike other modern PHP frameworks, does not let you specify your database configuration in the environment, so you do have to manually set it up. We get around that on Pantheon because it uses a Drupal variant called PressFlow, which does allow you to do that. However, if you install WordPress or if you install Backdrop, those frameworks do have those settings, so you won't have to actually set up any files. But I'll show you this. Now if we go up to sev.kbox, there we go. We should just be taken. Yep. Kbox. We should just be taken. Yeah. So here's the Drupal 7 install screen, and we will just go through the normal sort of setup. You can see that it's nice and quick. But when you get to this point, you'll actually have to put in your database credentials, and it'll spin up a settings.php. And I think that everything is just Drupal, but don't. The database is just called database.
So you don't have to create the database.
Yeah, we'll create it for you. Yeah, so you already have a database running. And if you go into the app itself, so I'm inside of that Sev app right now, and I run Kbox services. It should actually report. And this is actually like, for what you were talking about before, you would just need to know this info to be able to connect to it. But if you run Kbox services, you can see here, here's like the external connection info for that database, or sorry, the internal. This is what we just put in there. Database Drupal, user Drupal, password Drupal, database, or hostname database. So that's where the credentials are. And you can go in and you can just do the normal sort of setup. And it'll go set up a Drupal site for you. But this sets up like the most bare bones Drupal site that you can have. It just has literally the web server and the database. We also we'll give you Drush. So if you go in here and do Kbox Drush status, like Drush will be in there. You can use it, but you're not getting anything. Your site is on an island right now. Like it's not connected to Pantheon. It's just you have a Drupal site running locally. So whatever you do with it after that is kind of up to you. It'd be up to you to export it and put it wherever you want to go. So it's useful for people who just kind of want to hack around, but it is kind of stuck. I would almost recommend that you just like spin up a site on Pantheon and pull it down because you'll just get a more feature-rich experience. And you can at the very least push your stuff back up to like the dev environment on Pantheon and show people, what your site looks like.
If you wanted to grab like a distribution, I play around with distributions a lot to kind of see the space. How would you do that? You would show try to spin up a thing. Is there a way to do that, or do you need to spin up based on one of the distributions on Pantheon and then pull it down?
Yeah, if you're doing it on Pantheon, it definitely makes sense to just spin up whatever site and distro you want on Pantheon first, then pull it down. If you're right, so if you're doing it locally, what I would do is just do what we just did, and instead of going through the install workflow, just go into.
Would you use Drush to pull down the distro?
Yeah, you could do any number of things. You could use Drush. I would probably just like clone the repo in there or something, or untar a repo in there and then spin up git init and push it wherever you want to push it. But just go in there and delete the stock Drupal code and put your code in there.
So Git running is running in the background too as well as Drush.
On a Pantheon site, it is. For a stock Drupal 7 site, we just install Drupal for you, and it's up to you to if you want to use Git, use Git. Pantheon uses Git, so we can definitively say this is a requirement.
That's why you say.
But there are people who put Drupal in SVN, so we can say we think you should use Git, but for a bare bones Drupal app, you should assume as little as possible. Like for Pantheon, it's like they have opinions and we're following those opinions. But I think the real interesting thing, and this is like something that we're working on, was one of the big points of feedback is, people who don't fit into either of these sort of silos, that aren't using Pantheon, who need more than just Drupal. We're offering services to help people who are in those situations. So if someone like GE or whoever else has infrastructure and they want to like standardize locally on a platform like this and integrate with whatever their provider is, we can do that. But also to provide documentation for people to do it on their own if they want to do that. Because at the end of the day, a very simple Kalabox app is literally just a Docker Compose file. So if you're familiar with Docker and how it works, and you can read documentation that's in English, then you should be able to get pretty far on your own. Which means that you can create your own Kalabox apps. And the nice thing about that is you can share those apps on GitHub. They can have like the config that they want. They can have this Kalabox Compose and Kalabox YAML file, all the config that's required. And you can have other people on your team pull those sites down and spin them up on Kalabox, and you can standardize that way. So there's a lot of different things to do. The documentation on how to do it is not good right now, but we're putting in a lot of effort to make it gooder, more gooder.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, now we're going to move 12,000 miles away to Chingis Sandanov. Chingis.
Hi everyone. Mike, I think you turned off your microphone. I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you enable your microphone? Can you enable your mic so I can hear what people say? I can hear you now. I can't hear you. It used to work just a moment before. It used to work when Mike presented. Hi. Can you hear me? Ah. Hey. Can you hear me? Yes? I can't hear you. So should I make a presentation in silence? So hi everyone, I can hear you, so I will make a presentation in a complete silence. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah, okay. Thanks for inviting me. So my name is Chingis, and I will talk today about using Docker containers with Drupal, and I will show you a demo of the platform we built. It's based on Docker containers, and it will allow to deploy your Drupal website to any server. So I'm going to start with a presentation I have. I will share my screen, 1 minute. Yeah, so a few words about me. My name is Chingis Sandanov. Right now I'm in Russia, in a Russian city called Novosibirsk. It's, I think, 13 hours away from where you are, from Sunnyvale. So it's almost, it's 9 a.m. in the morning here. So I work with Drupal since 2010, and since then I built dozens of large-scale Drupal websites for governmental and enterprise companies like Johnson & Johnson, Louis Vuitton, World Bank Group. And at 2015, I co-founded Wodby. Prior to that, I worked as a developer and project manager at Drupal agency. So let's start. So I want to start my presentation with defining what is Drupal infrastructure. So when we talk about Drupal infrastructure, you can split it into two parts. It's a basic infrastructure that you must have to run your Drupal website and extra. So basic includes a web server, it's Nginx or Apache plus PHP. It's a database, it can be MySQL, we use MariaDB, or it can be Postgres. And cache storage, so default cache storage is a database, but you can use Memcached or Redis to boost your performance. And extra components includes search engine, Solr or Lucene. It's a HTTP cache like Varnish or Nginx. And sometimes you need Node.js to run, let's say, a commit server. So, and the problem is when you deploy your Drupal website to a dev server, you have to configure all of this infrastructure by yourself. And when your site is ready for production, you have to do the same work twice. You have to deploy this infrastructure all over again. And if something changes in your infrastructure on the dev server, you have to change it as well on production. And there are a few ways to automate it. So the most primitive way is you hire a system administrator or DevOps engineer who will do all this stuff. And I know a lot of companies who solve this problem this way. You also can use provisioning tools like Chef, Ansible, Puppet. So they provide their own language you can use to describe the infrastructure you want to deploy. And they translate this from their language to the language of the system where this scenario executed. Or you can use a fairly new approach, is containers and Docker containers specifically. So I will give you an intro to Docker containers and how it works and how you can use it. So, so the idea of containers is you take one of your dependencies, for example, Nginx plus PHP, you package it inside of container, and then you distribute this container across any machines. It can be a laptop or production server, and you run the same single container. Thus, the environment you deploy with containers will be completely consistent. And how it works is that unlike traditional virtualization, on the left side, you don't have a hypervisor. You install Docker engine directly on your host's machine, and then you run containers with Docker engine. So think of Docker container as like isolated process. So so you don't run you don't virtualize a completely new machine. You have less overhead with Docker, and you use resources of host operating system, and you run lightweight containers with usually it's a single process, and I will tell you about containers on the next slides. And I want to add that traditional virtualization and Docker and container virtualization are not opposite, because usually people deploy containers inside of virtual machines. So how Docker workflow looks like is first you have to create Docker file. I will show you on the next slide. Is you describe what you want to have inside of your container. Then you create, you build an image using this Docker file by using Docker Hub. Then you go to the server and pull the image from Docker Hub, and you use this image to run the container. So think of image is like a representation of the container for distribution. So this is an example of Docker file. So here I say that I want to create my Docker image from Alpine 3.4. And this means my container will inherit from another container. So Docker images use layers. So it looks something like this. You have a base image. So my base image here is Alpine 3.4. Alpine is a very lightweight Linux distributive. Originally, it was developed to run it on Raspberry Pi, but later they pivoted to containers. And Docker recommends to use Alpine Linux for all containers, and all official containers on Docker Hub use Alpine. Then I specify my name as a maintainer, and then I install Nginx from Alpine Packaging System, APK. And the last line is to copy your files to the root of the container. So you create this Docker file in a Git repository. You can create files in this repository, and then you connect this Git repository to Docker Hub. So you can see on the right, I have a Git repository from GitHub connected to Docker Hub, and Docker Hub will find my Docker file inside of my Git repository, and will build an image. And also, it will use files that I put inside of Git repository, and will copy it during the build of the image. So as you can see, I have many versions of builds of the same image. So when I pull image, I can specify which version to use. So the next step is you connect to your machine and you pull the image. And as you can see, there are layers being pulled. And because the image consists of layers, and when you make the next change and you want to update your image on a machine, you don't have to download the entire image again. You will download only a new layer. So think of Docker pull push system as Git. It's very similar. So once I have pulled my image, I run Docker images command, and I see there are images. I see image ID, the size of the image, and the tag. Tag is used as a version. And then I run my Docker container using command docker run. In the green color, I specify environment variables to use inside of this container. -v in the red color says that I want to mount a directory from my host machine to the container, because file system of the container is not persistent, and if I restart my container, I will lose all my data. So that's why I have to use volumes to not lose the data of MariaDB. Then I specify port. I kind of wrote request on this port to the container. And at the end, I specify just the name of the container. And then I run command docker ps. This shows me running containers. And I can access to the container. I can reboot it. Okay, so returning to my first slides is what I do is I package all these dependencies for Drupal infrastructure inside of containers, and I have a set of containers that I link with each other, because by default every container is isolated and each container don't know about other container, and that's when you have to use orchestration tools. So you use orchestration tools to make this ports mapping, to mount volumes, to update images when a new version is available, to limit resources. Yes, so you can limit resources of containers strictly by memory and not very strictly by CPU usage. And also you can use orchestration tools to scale your containers. So we are using Kubernetes. It's orchestration and cluster management software by Google. So Google used containers before Docker came up, and they accumulated their experience in this open source tool Kubernetes. But just a couple of weeks ago at DockerCon, Docker announced that they built their own orchestration inside of Docker. So this new version with built-in orchestration is not production ready yet, but I think this is definitely something interesting. And if you're thinking about building your infrastructure with containers, you should consider both Kubernetes and built-in orchestration. So that's all about containers, and now I'll talk about Wodby. It's a cloud infrastructure platform we built. So what's the purpose of Wodby? Is we provide pre-configured bundles, and our main focus is Drupal, and we have pre-configured bundles for Drupal of all versions. And once you deploy it, once you build your bundle, you can deploy it to your local machine or any hosting provider. And our platform is completely agnostic, meaning you can connect your own Git repository and your own server from any hosting provider. We just help you to manage and deploy your infrastructure. And the key benefits of Wodby is so you don't have to configure anything. We have pre-configured bundles. We provide you workflow tools to deploy instances of your app for development, staging, and production. We have tools for remote workspace. I show it all later. We have integration with Vagrant, so you can deploy containers to your to the Vagrant installed on your local machine. Team management, I'll show later. You can, with Wodby, you can enable HTTPS in one click. Not related to containers, but still very useful. And so is auto backups with mirroring. So I will show you demo. Minute. Yeah, so this is Wodby dashboard. So I'm going to deploy a new application. So the deployment process contains of 3 steps. So first, you choose the server where you want to deploy your app. So I have a connected Vagrant and DigitalOcean server. I can bring a new server. We have a native integration with DigitalOcean, but you can connect any custom server like this. Just copy this command and execute it as a root. It will install agent on your machine, and this agent will deploy all infrastructure provided by us. And the infrastructure we provide is completely transparent. We use public Docker images. You can find it on Docker Hub and on our GitHub. So let's deploy an app. And the next step is where you configure your bundle. So you can choose different versions of Drupal. And you can choose which services you want to deploy, like cache storage, search engine, HTTP cache, and database management, PHP-MyAdmin. And you can choose different implementation. For example, for Drupal 7, you can choose either PHP 5.6 or PHP 7. For Drupal 6, we use Memcache instead of Redis. So let's deploy everything. And the next step is you specify data sources for your code, database, and files. So I have Git repositories that I've connected here, or I can use a demo Git server and deploy pre-configured Drupal 8 preset. If I have a existing website, I can import it from Drush archive or from separate archives. And if you have a multi-siting, you can specify size directory. And if you have your Drupal doc root not inside of the root folder, you can specify the subfolder. So we are going to use a demo Git server, and we will deploy pre-configured Drupal 8 preset. So while it's deploying, I already have deployed apps. So let's see. So this is the page inside of the app, and I will quickly show you the key controls. So this is the app, just a simple plain Drupal 8. So the first tab deployment is you can use to deploy code to this instance. You can deploy from a branch or from a tag, and you can specify a deployment scenario by using Wodby YAML file. You just add Wodby YAML file to your doc root, and you describe scenario like this. So you describe pipeline like clear cache. It's a drush cr command. You want to run it inside of the doc root, and you want to run it only on a staging instance. And you can describe as many pipelines as you want, and you can run them in parallel, or you can use output of one pipeline inside of the other pipeline. So for more details, you can check out our documentation. And also you can enable auto deploy is when you, every time you push your code, the instance will pull the code automatically. So on Codebase, you can find files that you've changed remotely, and you can commit them from the dashboard. So you can use this feature to work with instance remotely from your IDE without deploying anything to your local machine. And you can see the history of deployed commit. On the domain tab, you can attach your custom domains. By default, we provide you wod.by domain. So it's a dev Drupal 8 Chingis Wodby. Dev is the name of the instance, Drupal 8 is the name of the app, Chingis is the name of my organization. You can have many organizations. Or you can add your custom domain. Let's do this. So I have this domain, Chingis XYZ. Additionally, you can add basic house if you don't want anyone to access your app. So let's wait for domain to attach because I want to generate HTTP certificate. So you can get a certificate from Let's Encrypt. So, so I can't get certificate because this domain is not attached to this server. So actually I have another app. Let's try it with this. So I will delete domain here, and let's try it with Drupal 7. So it's a clean Drupal 7 installation. Let's add the domain. This XYZ, mark it as a primary domain. Also, you can deploy additional instances. You can specify which branch to use, where to use from the database and files, and where to deploy. So different instances of the same app can be located on different servers. So let's obtain the certificate. Okay. It takes some time. Meantime, I show you cache tab is where you can clear all caches you want. Additionally, you can enable or disable varnish and op cache. So yeah, now I have my Let's Encrypt certificate. Let's check it. It doesn't work for some reason. Okay, I'll check it later. So backups. You can create backups manually for database and files, or you can configure auto backups and specify the time you want to run them every day and the depth of for how many days to store your backups. And additionally, you can mirror your backups to AWS Simple Safe Storage, or you can use Simple Safe Storage account we provide. It's included in our business tier. Once you enabled it, you now have a mirror checkbox here. So when I create a backup, it will create a backup not only on the server, but also it will copy it to AWS Simple Safe Storage. Yeah. And you can restore from a backup anytime you want. You can import your database and files from archives or copy them from another instance. Here we have a history of what had been done with this instance. And this is a list of containers I deployed. And I go to the container page and I see all the details, how to access the container, what's installed inside of this container. Yes. On the settings tab, you have some information about bundle version. So bundle is a set of containers we provide, and we have different versions of bundles because we constantly upgrade this infrastructure. So for example, 3.10 version has a new version of Nginx, MariaDB, and Memcached comparing to 3.0.0. You can also debug your instances remotely by enabling Xdebug. Put an instance into maintenance mode, and you can download Drush aliases to run your Drush commands remotely. Also, I wanted to show you team management. Is you can invite your colleagues and attach them different roles. So let's invite my co-founder Pavel. So after I added a new teammate, I can also manage his access to certain applications. For example, I want him to access all applications, but not this one, so I can change his role. And local instance is instance you can deploy to your Vagrant machine. I'm not gonna do this now because I have a slow internet connection and it will take a very long time to download the images. As Mike said, there is no substitution for good internet connection. So those are the basics of Wodby platform. So feel free to try it yourself. We have a free tier with a single instance. So thank you. I would love to hear your questions, but the mic doesn't work. So I'm gonna end here. Thank you.